right, welcome to the Pet Life Podcast. As always, I'm Patrick, and today I have with me Hometown Bear. As you can see the name right there. What's up, man?
Hey guys, I'm doing pretty good, man.
Yeah, how's everything up in Canada? Where are you exactly again?
In Vernon, BC. So where is that? That's like I guess that's the southern interior, as they call it. It's like about 4.5 hour, 5 hour drive outside of Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's kind of like a little midsection of BC. It's a kind of semi-desert, so it gets pretty hot here during the summer, but also gets some pretty big snowfalls in the winter as well.
I was gonna say because I think there's a bunch of bears up in the BC area doing a build.
Yeah, I think it's Runner Bear and Outdoor Enthusiastic. They've been kind of heading up this kind of bear meetup where I think they're going to Creston, BC,
Mm-hmm.
trying to build up a small bear community. I think just up the river from Beartaria. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know that's cool, man. Did you check the doc?
Yeah, man, just watched the rest of it today. I watched a little bit last night, and then I had to finish it up this morning. But yeah, it's just really well made.
Yeah, man. What so from? I mean, we'll talk more about bear community stuff, but like, what stood out to you, man? Because there were so many powerful things for me. But
I guess what really stood out to me, I guess I was going through a bit of a phase where I was just trying to kind of figure things out. The narrative really took a big shift, I think, when Trump got elected. I just saw everyone at work was freaking out. And me, I'm a lot more calm with my approach. I just kind of thought, okay, I'm not seeing everything here. Everyone seemed pretty irrational. So I started kind of exploring it myself. And then from there, it just sort of turned into a bit more of a spiritual journey, I think. Jordan Peterson came on Joe Rogan. I was kind of in the Joe Rogan experience a bit back then.
same.
But my thinking was all over the place there. I had friends that would describe to me like some elements of Krishna and Buddhism. So I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool idea. And my mind was just really open to just about anything, right? And but there was a side of me that was also kind of locked with a traditional side of growing up. And I think that's what I wanted to kind of start exploring a little bit more. And so that led me to some of the conservative talkers like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, and yeah, kind of the usuals. And I think that's where Owen popped up. And then that's what started speaking to me. He just had this unique sense of humor that I thought was, okay, this guy's thinking the way I think a little bit more. He just likes to kind of poke fun at things. And yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that because every single person I've talked to, bear related or not, but people on similar journeys, it feels like it's been the same people, which go like the path to getting towards listening to Owen or kind of where our spiritual mindset is. And I think that for me is what's been blowing my mind the most, is
Mhm.
because like you get a bunch of people from all over the world that are like, oh yeah, I was kind of diving in. I started listening to Rogan or Crowder or the Shapiro's, Jordan Peterson, whoever, and you kind of
Yeah.
realize it's like, well, what is the underlying thing that's kind of connected all of us, and it's truly like that spiritual truth, that logos. And I think that's
Absolutely.
through listening, obviously through Owen as well. It was just like that's what rung out to me because it was like all I'm trying to do is just figure out the truth. Because like you said, when Trump was elected, I remember where I was, and I remember I wasn't in New York at the time, but I was living there and just being around it. I mean, I did catering events where I was there with Trump, and everyone was like all over him. Like I remember just he was praised, and just seeing this shift in what I was experiencing in the news. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me, and you know what I mean. So like I think that's what blew my mind, and you start to follow like the people who are talking, like the Crowders at the Brogans, and kind of more open-minded, looking at things differently. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, right? And then you start to realize like, but something doesn't feel right here. Like it doesn't feel complete. Like I still feel like there's something that's not being spoken, or something that's being kind of uh, pushed to the wayside. And yeah, so I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that, but
Well, I think what made me also was it was easy for me to make that shift was I would watch some stand-up comedians. Like I was big into George Carlin and Bill Hicks. I
yeah,
was kind of picky with some of the comedians I would listen to. Like I wouldn't just listen to every single one, but George Carlin, Bill Hicks, they taught me a little bit how to kind of see things a little bit more. There's more than meets the eye. So George Carlin, what he did was he had a way of exploring English language. So you could read rhetoric pretty well. People use certain words, and it's to kind of either cover up a certain narrative
mm-hmm.
or just it's some underlying motivation. and also make it funny too. So that was actually a pretty big part for me to make that shift. And then Bill Hicks, he was a little bit more on the darker side of things, but almost the same kind of theme. And I think with having those guys in my mind, I started looking at the rhetoric people are using against Trump. And I thought, okay, so maybe this is just sort of what people are just on maybe a certain frequency. This is what they're picking up on. But I'm seeing there's got to be a little bit more to this.
Totally. Yeah, and what's so fascinating when you do talk about comedy and how much comedy, and I know Owen talks about it, but all comedians will talk about it to some extent, is just how much their job is to shine light on these truths.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're doing it like a George Carlin, where it's like using rhetoric really well, or Bill Hicks, or whatever that may be, is you start hearing all these truths coming out. But with truth, right, there's different frequencies. Like there's people who obviously do a lot of comedy where the truths of their stories are like, oh, this is truthful, like this happened to me, but it's in such like like you could feel like the lower energy, like this darkness. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to comedy shows in New York, and you just hear the kind of the same stories over, like the miserable, and I'm like, man, this doesn't feel like, yeah, it's true to you, but it just, there's something that's not resonating. But when you start to hear comedy that is hitting on points, you're like, oh, this is starting to tackle some bigger issues that seem very and appear and feel very truthful, but then you're also trying to make it fun, and or at least a little bit enjoyable. So you're not like leaving like, well, that fucking brought me down,
Well,
So
with George Carlin, it was interesting because not only did he did the comedy very well, like I don't really agree with his politics now that I've changed a lot since then, but still looking back on him, he had this theatrical style of movement. So he moved like a cartoon. And I noticed this when I was doing animation as well. Some of my coworkers were looking for animation reference, and that was a big thing. Like pull up this video of this what was it? Trying to think of some old black and white films. They say, look at the slapstickness, look at the way they move. And George Carlin, I noticed he did the same thing. He would try and time his jokes and punchlines around a certain movement, and
yeah,
that kind of elevated the humor, I thought, and it just always resonated with me. And yeah, then I thought, what with Owen, he would kind of do the same thing, not so much like the theatrical movements, but he got me picturing that in my mind a little bit more. And I miss that a lot. And so I think that was a big stepping stone for me to kind of like become more interested in the bear community.
for sure, man. And what's cool is um, what you kind of chiming into a little bit more of the animation, if we wanted to go into it a little bit. What's cool is how you, like many of the other animators, have brought so much of your own flair and so much of your own style to similar characters that Owen's talking about, or people are kind of throwing back and forth. So do you want to maybe just kind of go into a little bit of your animation journey and kind of what is it you do? And
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess how it all started was I guess yeah, Owen was talking about Dom Pettit. And that was a big thing for me just because the whole idea of Dom Pettit was so cartoony in my mind, just the way this guy's in real life, the things he says, I'm like, no way. This is the kind of thing I would love to make a cartoon about. So I
Right.
just did like one silly illustration and posted it, slapped a little hashtag on there, unbearables. So I thought maybe there might be a few out there that'll enjoy this, right? I wasn't really looking for anything in particular. We'll see what
Right.
happens. And then Anchor Bear liked it and he shared it, made us write up about it. And it was really, really sweet and genuine. So then
Yeah.
right after, I think just like good a few dozen bears just started falling my way. And it was actually kind of shocking because I just kept to myself mostly. I didn't know where I was going to go with animation on that level.
Yeah.
I wanted to explore it on my own, make
Yeah.
my own cartoons. That's something that's been on my mind for years. But
Do you
yeah,
work
just
in
little small
animation?
stepping stones.
Sorry,
Oh, I beg your pardon?
do you currently work in animation outside of what you're doing?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
we did a career animator. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, since August.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you doing what kind of animation exactly? Just like for what TV shows?
So yeah, for TV shows. So like I worked on like Teen Titans Go, Rick and Morty, a Canadian show, an animated series based on a famous Canadian show called Corner Gas.
Oh, cool, man.
And yeah, and there's a few other side projects in between all those major ones. So yeah, I learned a lot more about TV style animation rather than the smooth Disney hand drawn. You do it with the flipping the paper and everything.
Hmm.
I learned a little bit of that in school and some of the principles that are required to make nice animation, but I never had the chance to train myself into that level yet. But
Right.
I always loved it, so I would try and do it on my own. Just try and see if I could mimic some of the old school style, but
Yeah.
all self-training. It takes a long time.
Man, that's awesome, dude. And so tell me a little bit about like just the process of animation, man, because again, I'm fascinated with, and I was saying this the other day to Woodshop there, like I'm fascinated with people like yourself and many others who are doing things. I think that's what, for me, this podcast has really kind of blossomed
Mm.
into is bringing things that are going to spark people's own interests of their own creativity. Because as we know, I think, and we can go into this later, but our genuine, authentic creativity is that gift from God that he's now you giving us this vessel to kind of shine that light through. And I always want to hear people's stories and what just kind of like, I mean, what goes through that process, man, because the idea for me at least doing it, and I can draw, but I can't like that for me. I'm like, wow, that's above my head. So, but yeah, tell us kind of maybe if it kind of jumping around a little bit, what is the process like? Like, how do you from the start to the finish? Because you've been posting things about it, but it's still just so fascinating.
Yeah, I guess I post a lot of work in progress stuff, and as much as I really wish I could just kind of get out tomorrow and then just kind of be on to the next project, there is a huge process involved with just each and every little step. So a lot of it will start with a funny idea. I'll hear something on the stream, and that makes me think of my own kind of cartoony idea. I always like to do the comedy in cartoons. Some people like to focus on beautiful animation, like just like how a person moves. So
Right.
when you're doing training in animation, they'll often refer you to just lots of really subtle movements and acting and a lot of drama. And so I think that inspires people, like just the genuine acting that goes into animation. For me, I always love the timing of a gag, the setup, the punchline, very Looney Tunes slapstick kind of stuff. So
Mm.
that always resonated with me. And yeah, I guess with one of the processes that I go through is you start with a kind of a rough drawing, almost like a comic book. You're just kind of scribbling things out in paper. You're thinking, okay, I see the character doing this. He walks up to this character, says something. This little funny thing happens, and yeah, it just kind of keeps going on. And then you
So
start cleaning it up from there.
do you know with the backgrounds, like, is that its whole own separate illustrations, and then you're putting the characters with it? Like, how does that work? Like that for me,
Yeah. So was it? I do them in Photoshop. Yeah, I just kind of do like a rough drawing, and then I'll eventually go over top with another layer and just start kind of cleaning up with just more solid lines. I'll try and go through like a tapered line look. So I like when things kind of start off a little bit like thin and they kind of get like thicker towards the middle. And
mm-hmm.
I'll try and do it where I'll take like one pen stroke. I don't try and make it really slow and itchy kind of looking, like more like a vibration. I try and just give it one broad stroke, and if I can get that, then yeah, sometimes I just like hit Control Z like 20 times until I get that one right line.
Right.
But it seems to have an effect on people. When they look at it, they're thinking, "Oh, what's with that line work?" Um, so I don't know. It's interesting. I never quite understood it yet either.
It's fascinating, right? When you see how powerful animation is in drawing people in, um, being we in the truth community, whatever you want to call it, know obviously the impacts like Disney has had and still has on
Mhm.
the consciousness of people's minds, and using animation as this platform to catapult obviously more sin-based messaging, right? But you just see like how powerful you can uh, you know mess with someone's perception purely based off of these types of things. Like, they seem so minuscule at first, but when you, and maybe you can chime more in on this, but when you see like how people use their creative ways to make it their own, right? I just think for me that's the most fascinating thing. Like, anything you want to add? I know I didn't really hit anything specific, but it's just, yeah.
It's interesting. I guess for me, I guess the big part was always just like Looney Tunes. So I never really got too caught up in the spellcraft of Disney, I guess. Like I don't know if it ever really worked my worldview so much. I always appreciate just how a cartoon's made, but I never really took it as that's going to be my world and how I perceive it. It's just I always I guess I was always able to separate animation from the real world, so that was always good. And I
Right.
was able to find out what I just preferred in animation. And
Yeah.
it always came back to slapstick style humor because my dad he was a pretty funny guy too. He was pretty eccentric in the way his mind would work, but yet he's also a toll crusher, goes out, does horse logging and things like that. So he comes home with his overalls and his plaid shirt just covered in like, sawdust. And it was a pretty funny sight to see, right? And
Yeah.
just, but then he would throw on like something like, well, this might seem kind of crazy to some people. We grew up watching Blazing Saddles. That
Oh,
was our family movie. So we knew it word for word, and we would just like quote it all the time between our siblings, right? It's just like, or my
awesome.
siblings, just oh yeah, remember this line? Then someone would start finishing it. Then my brother would come in, he would start finishing the whole scene, and it's just
Yeah.
something like that. And, I mean, that was like us for the longest time, and I think that was a big influence on what made me like, I guess like the old school cartoons as well.
Mm. Dude, see, that's just goes to show you, right, the power that uh, film and animation really has on people. Like it builds these family connections, and you can, have that time where, oh yeah, we would do this stuff with our family, or oh, we used to love that cartoon, or whatever the case is, and you can see
Mhm.
how it can be so impactful on people's lives. And when you see it's being used for for a lot of people all the wrong reasons, right? Not everybody is privy to the subliminal messaging, but you see though how many people now like idol worship these types of shows and these types of characters that come in these things, and you see how it's not just one person in a family. It could be entire families. Like one that comes to mind, even though it's not just animation, is like Star Wars. Like I know people who like the whole family's like obsessed, and you just start to
Yeah.
see like holy crap, like the power of film, television, just stories in general have this ability to literally like affect generations. And it sounds, well, I know what you're doing is going, all right, I'm going to do the same thing, but trying to put out a positive message, putting humor in it so it's not dull, but like you said, bringing it back to like a Looney Tunes type, which, you know I think now more than ever
There
is
was
needed.
some power into that for sure, and I think it all came down to the timing of like how they would draw it. So I mean, yeah, there's one thing to having a character kind of walk on screen, says something, and you can make it look really beautiful. Like say Snow White, they would have all this like subtle movements in their clothing, and then subtle facial expressions. But what I noticed in Looney Tunes was they would just stand still, and then when the gag comes, then you can kind of, I don't know, they would really accentuate that, and
Mhm.
if that makes any sense. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember growing up watching Looney Tunes, and for me, like, I think what was interesting is this, they, like you said, they focused on the timing, right? Is like if there's like a thing where you see the slow head turn, or like 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 if the Elmer Fudd
Yeah.
has got the thing and the duck's hiding, you just see like those slow motions, the eyes, you know what I mean? Like really
Kind of
focusing
with the
on,
music and yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think that can, correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of in many ways can help separate the reality of this animation that they're trying to do, and really just letting people know, hey, this is just a cartoon.
Mhm.
Compared to like where you just said Snow White, is like they're trying to focus on every single motion to make it mimic like it's real life, right? To give people that illusion. And that's what even Walt Disney said, is like,
Yeah.
if we can get people to cry over this cartoon, like and I'm paraphrasing, and like we've successfully done what we needed to do. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned, yeah, kind of creating the illusion. And I think that's what really helps with I guess making animation a lot more realistic and subtle. You're trying to focus on the human drama things. It can really, really make people relate to something in their own life, even something traumatic. And I think in movies like Snow White, I don't know, a whole bunch of others, Cinderella and stuff like that, it really taps into some of these inner emotions we have. And I guess for me, while I appreciate that, I definitely grew up watching things like that. My thing has always just been about the humor side of things. And I don't know why. It was always just a thing that drew me to it for sure. And
do you think
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
power of humor, like just power that humor has on the higher vibration of like self. Like I don't know, I just, for me, I've always, I mean, people, I don't know, I feel like comedy, like people who really like a good comedy, that they can just laugh, they're not going to be offended by everything. It's like this ability to just allow themselves to let go of that negative tension, and that, and just kind of breathe again, you know what I mean? Like when people go to really
Mhm.
listen to comedy and not be like, okay, what can I pick apart here to, that's offensive, but just be like, holy, like, I can't believe they just said that, or man, that was
Exactly.
really funny. Like it just gives you this lighter sense of self, you know?
So what was it? I have a pretty big family. So I have two brothers and three sisters. And my oldest brother, Jer, he was kind of a unique person where he couldn't get through school. When he was about age 12, he had I think he was just a bit on the spectrum, but he just couldn't follow along with teachers at school. So
Mhm.
they would freak out at him. They would get so upset that he wasn't able to follow along. And it was one day he decided, I'm just going to walk off school and I'm just going to go find my dad at one of these construction sites nearby. I'm just going to go work with him. It's like, I don't care. You can, try and drag me back, but I'm going to work with you, dad. But from that point on, he was always just hard at work, doing all this like tough labor and stuff. And
Mhm.
he was kind of a hardened guy. So by age 15, he was like a hardened person. He looked like someone that's already 25 just by hanging out with like some of the other construction workers. He'd be out drinking and stuff like that. And then he'd just come home and you just kind of you'd see him for a brief moment, like, okay, this guy's really intense. But then we would all sit down and watch a cartoon or something like that together, and just the roar that would come out of his laughter. You're thinking, if that can elevate someone from that state to that high of a state, it's just phenomenal. And it was so contagious. And then he would get my dad
Mhm.
laughing, and it was just this really high pitched kind of sound that it becomes even more funnier just as the whole family's just getting in on this. And
Totally, man.
yeah.
And it really lets everyone remind themselves of how important laughter is. And I
Mhm.
have my best friend is the same way. Like whenever we'd go to places and people hadn't met him yet, like especially when we were younger, they'd be like, because he's really goofy and he has this really contagious laugh, like where once he starts laughing, everyone else starts laughing. But it was so funny where we'd go places and I'd be like, he'd be like, what the fuck is he doing? I'm like, just you're gonna love him by the end of this. And he'd start doing his thing and laughing, and everyone would just be dying laughing because you're just like, at first you're like, what is going on? And then as he's going on, you're laughing, and it just goes to show you, man, like genuine, pure enjoyment of like of people just having a good time, right? Like as you said, your brother's been like, was hard nosed, like been through some shit, especially at a young age.
Absolutely.
You realize that like when you bring everyone back to laughter, you realize just this just dissipation of like all that stress or all that negative energy. And I think that's
The
what's so
nonsense just shatters. It's pretty amazing like how much, yeah, it's a powerful tool, especially with all the spellcraft that is around you. And sometimes you don't even notice how much has just been put on you, and from a young age all the way up into a young adult. I mean, I know some of the people when I went to school, like you were saying before, just their obsession with some of these movies and stories and stuff like that. I mean, it was their life dream to be part of Disney. And that I knew that was a difference with me right away. I didn't have any dream to be part of a particular company or anything like that.
mm,
I, I just wanted to do animation just because it just spoke to something very deep inside of me.
mm,
And I didn't even know it was going to be animation up until maybe a year before I went to school. I always liked to draw cartoons growing up, make little comic strips and things like that. And I would do it kind of similar. I would try and draw it in a way that almost seems animated, but that's kind of where I stuck things. And then, yeah, it was just when I was working on this one job, I was working on community, like the community watch for eBay. So we
mm.
had to take down bad listings and things like that. They're breaking the rules and things. And then I remember I just kept getting spam with this animation tutorial DVD. It was just in the wrong category, and so I just had to keep taking it down. But it ingrained in me animation. Okay, that's an actual career you can do drawing.
Right.
I wasn't interested in graphic design really or anything making logos, so I just didn't really understand like how you can make a career based on that. But things started to click once I saw that. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Isn't that awesome, man, dude? And like that's God working in a way that just is totally putting you in a lane where it's like why do I,
Absolutely.
and then you realize you're like, oh, I just need to listen, like listen, see what's in front of me, and you start to realize, man, like I mean you get it, but it's just like, oh man, these are just signs everywhere, right? And just like the as above so below, the upside down world, like people and entities can try to put that negative energy, but at the same time, simultaneously, you got God doing the same thing, right? And it's knowing like ultimately like what's my intuition telling me. And as you said, what I can imagine with this, you're like something my gut's telling me I should try this or take this tutorial or look more into this.
Absolutely. And I was kind of a little unsure of like how I would get into a school or anything because I didn't get through high school myself. So I knew that I would need at least need something like that to get into a college or something.
Hmm.
But kept exploring around, and then this one school that was in Kelowna, which is about a 45-minute drive from here,
Hmm.
they were accepting applicants just based on their portfolio. You know,
Oh,
I guess there was some technicality there why they were doing it, but it was okay. Just yeah, as long as I just had like the enrollment fee for a seat and then just showed them my portfolio, they were just like, yeah, you can draw. I think we can teach this person. Like I already
oh,
had computer skills. Like I did that out of my own self-interest. I just kind of figured out how to tinker with computers and whatnot. So I feel
nice.
like I was able to navigate through the tech world. So yeah, I felt like it was a perfect fit for me. And what was interesting is my sister, just below me, is we're all 2 years apart in the family. Like literally
Mhm.
every sibling's 2 years apart.
Nice.
So yeah, she was the other artist in the family, and then I convinced her, hey, you should, come to school with me. That would be awesome. Just brother and sister in the same class, and we're just learning animation. And I don't know how I managed to sell it to her, and that was pretty cool. So yeah, we went on a journey for 2 years, just learning animation together, and
Nice.
our interests were aligned. We were both, like I said before, big Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks fans. So
Yeah.
we kind of stood out, I think, from the class where everyone wanted to be Disney, like company animators for Disney, and we're just like, no, we're gonna do our own thing. I don't know how it's gonna happen. We're gonna tell our own stories. Some of it's gonna be funny, maybe add some drama there. Who knows, right? Maybe some
Totally.
inspiration from our life story. Who knows? But I guess what was thing we learned about with animation is it takes a long time to even just make one story.
Oh,
So I know
totally.
I've had ideas that would be like, I don't know, they go back like 10 years ago, and I'm still trying to, figure them out some way. And then
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I had to put them on the back burner, then just kind of let these ones that would naturally come about, and then just
Mhm.
kind of just go with the flow with those ones.
Dude, totally, man. And just kind of chime in on that. So I don't know if you've watched anything or what I've, but anyway, I've done film and television for a long time, and I wrote a while back. I had this story come to me that was an animated film, um, that I created and wrote the whole thing. Had it all well and good, and I realized I was like, well, where do I want to try to get this thing sell? Like, what I would like to try at least.
Mhm.
And I was able to just through connections and hard working and staying on top of it, I was actually able to pitch it to Nickelodeon a long time ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, so I like, for me, it was building like basically a pitch deck for the first time, like a true pitch deck, and like knowing how to sell it. And it's a really, it's an in-depth story. Like it has that, Disney, Nickelodeon type feel where it, but I wasn't, I'm open to changing it up. But long story short, I remember going and finally actually like being in one of those rooms pitching to, some of the people there, some of the development team people, and they're like, hey, this isn't for us. Like it was more of one of those situations where they're like, this is the way you're seeing it, well, we're kind of going direction. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. But for me, I was like, at least I'm in here. Like I put my mind to something and I got it. But to
Mhm.
what you were saying, I was like, this is still a project and a story that I'm still passionate about, but kind of putting on the back burner and realizing like this might not be the right time. Instead of trying to force a story or force anything, just learning how to take a step back and be like, okay, what did I learn from this experience? Was there something beneficial? You know what I mean? And then learning how to be like, especially when you're a go-getter mentality, like, hey, things aren't going to necessarily work out the way you intended, but that doesn't mean it's done. It doesn't mean that it's over.
Yeah.
I think that's for me has been a huge learning point because at least back then, I didn't fully understand it. It was more like, okay, I got to figure something out. I got to figure it, and
Yeah.
it came off as desperation, and I realized that not too long after. So I was like, you know what, good learning opportunity. But for me, it was great to from talking about animation, not necessarily learning how to do animation, but talking to some animators,
Mhm.
uh, and seeing just how you know like meticulous in every detail has to be a certain way. And I was like, man, that's intense. I can totally see why these are super hard to do and so expensive. But yeah, man,
I think one of the joys with animation too that I learned is that there's definitely like the heavy intricate part of it where like okay you need to add this, you need this detail, you need to make sure you're setting up your shot like this. So I guess there's this process called layouts So you go from storyboards to layouts, and layouts are basically taking the background and just kind of mapping out, okay, there's going to be a dresser in the foreground. So when the character walks through, you can basically cut off this whole portion below their waist and you won't have to draw that. So it's almost like just kind of indicating the animators, okay, you can save some time drawing here.
Right.
You want to make the character look like he's getting smaller into the background over here because like maybe it's the scene's a kitchen or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Character's walking around, maybe he's like kind of stirring out of a big cauldron in the background. So we have to show the kind of different areas he's going to be moving around the background. And that was
Mhm.
yeah, that was one of the things I had to wrap my head around. And then I don't know, I guess what kind of got me through all that was there's so many cheats, there's so many different little ways you can cut corners
Yeah.
and you can still make it look good.
Right. Right. Dude. And see, that's what's cool, man, is when you know how to do it, and you, it's like anything else, practice, taking time, really focusing on your skill, right? Like you can make those things look flawless, right? And I don't know if you can pull it up or just show maybe some, just a visual of maybe something that you might have. I mean,
I don't
if
know
not,
how to
I can
do that
always
kind of
post something.
zoom.
Huh?
I'll definitely post the animation we're working on today. So have you seen that little, maybe it's in my Instagram story that just showed like a picture of the BB, like his bear character, he's just kind of snoring in his
Yep.
bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I have that pretty much cleaned up now today, and I'm hoping I can maybe post it tonight or something. So pretty
Yeah, man.
excited I can show that.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, so I guess what was interesting about that is it's supposed to do with he's sleeping and it's the whole cartoon is it starts out with Ira just kind of pestering him, you know, hey, take the $6 million deal, right? And you can do some subversion and gatekeeping and everything. Really, really just kind of harass him, saying, come on, you can do this. And he's just like, no, no, the whole time. Then I have this second portion where he's like kind of done with Ira. He wakes up and it's now Ari Sheckelberg trying to call him up. And he's just like kind of rude awakening. He's just like, what do you want? And then he's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of doing the same thing, like, oh, come on, you're doing great, kid. I got this great deal for you.
That's hilarious. That is so
And
funny.
yeah,
Dude, and are you getting Owen to send his own like side lines, or is this stuff you're pulling from the podcast or the
some
streams?
stuff I'm pulling from the streams. And you know, it started out as like this little 3 minute cartoon idea. I thought I just kind of had something simple that I could kind of throw together, and it just kept growing from there. I
Nice.
would slap some music together, like that classical animation music, and I would think, okay, as the music's kind of building up and doing this, it sounds like Owen, if I cut up the dialogue this way, it sounds like this is about to happen. It
Mm.
just everything kept kind of coming together so naturally. Then I started stringing gag after gag together, and
Yeah,
I was a little concerned. I thought, I don't even know if I'm really getting the gravy here or anything. I'm just kind of going by what seems funny.
dude. That's an gravy in itself, though, man, because it's like you're bringing something that's authentic, right? Like, and I feel that's where, a lot of us are into the bear community too. Is that, you're looking for gravy, looking for truth, trying to find where the gravels may be, but it's also just knowing that gravy is also just being like being in the flow, being in that flow state, like Barnett's always talking about, being in the moment, because that's when things start to just naturally occur, right? Epiphanies, or creating this entire new story that, you thought you were only gonna do a little bit, but now it's turning into something so much bigger. And like that, the fruition, that the output, right, is the gravy in itself.
Absolutely.
That's at least how I see it a lot of times, because
I was thinking this not too long ago before, but I was thinking like how with every drawing, every line a person makes, I think that gives someone like a physical window into seeing actual frequencies the person is making, right? Just like right down, if you were like to like zoom right in on a line, you're seeing every tiny vibration that's making up that line. It could be a very large vibration or a big or a nice, more smoother one. There's a feeling somebody's getting from that. And I feel like every little motion that your hand's making there, it goes right down to a genetic level, even a spiritual level. There's something coming out of the person and it's being translated to the pencil onto the paper. And you may not be able to see it because you obviously just have to almost look at it with a microscope to actually see like how like shaky that line is. But there's a feeling you get from it. And I started analyzing this, like when people just kept having the same reaction to my drawings, they were like, your style, there's something about it. I would be hard on myself thinking like it's not even close to what these famous artists can do, like not even close. I never went to Cal Arts or anything, or Sheridan. I just don't know if I can animate on that scale. But I knew that God was showing me that I have some kind of ability to get through to people. So that was what definitely gave me the confidence to just keep moving forward.
Yeah, man. And so with you, kind of talking about the spiritual side of things, was this
Mhm.
something that you know kind of came authentically in the last couple of years, or is this something that you always were tapped into, or
I
kind
think it
of?
was something I was definitely tapped into for a long time, just kind of going back my whole history with like how my family would really bond over humor and stuff.
Mhm.
But I think the more spiritual side of things started happening maybe just a few years ago, or after Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty, I mean, as much as it was a unique experience, I'm pretty proud to have been part of that.
Mhm.
Um, it was also kind of brought me to one of my more lowest states I've been in a while, just because I thought this is where animation was heading. I thought this is what people are more attracted to, is this kind of dark, nihilistic humor. And it wasn't for me. It was
Mhm.
kind of cool to be part of something popular, but I knew that this is not what I wanted to do. And it was right after Rick and Morty. I was actually kind of upset with God in ways, because I had a Christian upbringing that left me confused. Actually, I mean, as much as we tried our hardest to follow along with it, but I guess we went to different churches. We've also had church communities like turn on us for just kind of being more unique in our ways. So things were a little bit more traumatic on that side, with the religious things, but wasn't until like after Rick and Morty and listening to Jordan Peterson that kind of got me rethinking it again. I recalibrated with my Christianity again, thinking, okay, maybe there was something I was being upset about, but didn't really reconcile with either. And I
Right.
think once I started asking those questions and started praying again, things slowly started to unveil itself to me and realize, no, 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 things are part of his plan and that you are doing something very unique. And yeah, it was just something like that. I think, okay, I can still keep doing this. And it was Hometown. That was actually my idea that I had like 10 years ago. It started with the bear character, looked just like how I draw BB now.
Mhm.
It was just this design that came to my mind. The
Wow.
bear's original name was Tucker, and that was in reference to a George Carlin joke where he's making fun of crappy boy names. There was Todd and Tucker.
Yeah,
And so that's what I wanted to name. Like, all right, I'll just name this dumb bear character Tucker. And he
hilarious.
just does these really silly things in his hometown, ends up getting in the dumpsters because he's a problem bear. He always eats garbage, and it kind of give him this Popeye thing where every time he gets garbage, it would just make him kind of become like a raw bear in nature again.
Yeah, that's
And
hilarious.
yeah, and then he got kind of involved with this short character called Bill. He's a duck. He's just foul mouthed. He always has like a toque on, and he's always scheming. He's definitely like a grabbler in ways, but not successful.
He's got a little bit of Ira in him.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this scene where he's like at the counter at Tim Hortons. He's trying to order coffee, and he's saying, "Okay, I'm going to pay for this in part cash, part coupon, part credit card, part debit card, part bounce check, and I'm also going to borrow 75 cents from that guy." And just waves to a bum.
It's hilarious.
And the person at the counter is just getting really, really furious with him.
Dude, so where's the story? Where's that story? Have you just kind of put it off to the side? Like, is it in like a phase where it's been kind of put out there?
Yeah, it's kind of just sitting there floating in the ether right now. I would love to return to it just because I feel like that's where I sort of was hammering out my the things I like to do in animation. I was always just kind of practicing. I not a writer, so I just couldn't seem to put a story together, and I think that actually discouraged me a few times. I wanted to make a story about it, but I could only think of gags. So it
Mhm.
just kind of sort of like what I'm doing with this cartoon right now. I just started stringing all these things from the streams together, try and make it funny, but there's no real storyline involved. So
Right.
I knew that that was one thing I knew I had to kind of just wait. And maybe I'll find someone that I can just kind of work with as a team and be just like, hammer out our strengths and stuff like that.
Dude.
But yeah, I never completely abandoned it. And I think that's why I wanted to keep drawing BB just kind of similar to the way I've always been drawing this bear character. It's just something I've been practicing for years.
Dude, that's such a deep sync though, too, man. The fact that you had for like 10 years now this type of character that fits perfectly
Mhm.
to what's happening now. Like, and that goes to show you, like you said, that was a project that was authentic to you, like you came up with. And I think that's what a lot of people, as much as you were saying earlier, like wanted to create for Disney or some of these big companies, right? Like what you're doing is you're just, a lot of people want to just fall into a system for the title and the accolades. And
Yeah.
we've all been there, but like, at least for myself now, I realized with the acting and all that world, I'm like, I want to do my own things. Like, and you start realizing is like what we're saying kind of sub at like a subconscious level is like, I want to allow that connection with God to kind of, manifest through me, like in these ideas that come to you, right? Like you're like, I don't know where it came from. It just, I had all of a sudden had this idea about a bear, and you start
Yeah.
writing it, or like, at least for me, I'm like, oh, I had these stories that just came to me in dreams, or came to me just out of no, like I have nowhere, don't know where it came from, and you start realizing, you're like, see, that's
Yeah.
what's so great about learning how to create for yourself, and knowing, yeah, I don't have a job at Disney where I already know that we have the budget to create this one thing, and all I'm doing is doing what someone else is telling me to do. It's knowing like, all right, I don't know if we're going to get this made. I don't know if it's going to see it all the way to fruition in, the 2 years or year that we give ourselves, or you give yourself, but it's authentic to who I am or who you are. And that's what's cool, is when you start to get there, I feel like you start meeting people on that same frequency. It's like, all right, I finally met someone who's kind of doing the same thing, the piece that I was missing, and this person's giving the piece that I was missing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that was definitely God just showing me how to have patience with it. It's not a skill that's going to go away anytime soon. It's like one way or another, you're going to make a cartoon, whether it's 15 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to make a cartoon. So just, and it's going to be a good one. So I think that's what definitely gave me the joy to keep, pursuing my passions there. And, what's interesting about syncs and everything, 10 years ago when I came up with the idea for Hometown, I had this other character. I want to do something a little bit more on the action adventure side of things, just as a breakup from, all the silliness too. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. I love to do that stuff probably more than all the other ideas. But this other one too is based on a character who was a dream warrior. His ability was to slip in and out of the dream world and the physical realm, and he could see the demons, how they were trying to slowly get onto the other side. And they would do it through people's nightmares. So basically, they would visualize a nightmare, then they would start turning into it.
Interesting.
And he had the ability to see that, but he could also just through meditation slip into the dream world and fight them there before they emerged in the physical realm.
Wow.
And his name was Benjamin Owen Connolly.
Wow.
I was just like, what? That's what I named him. He's just some Irish guy that, he just fought demons, and he had to jump in and out of the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And yeah,
And that's before you even were aware of Big Bear.
this is like 2009 or something like that. Like I was just going through my old drawings and stuff, and I just saw like the little synopsis I had to write for him for a class assignment, and I'm like, that's right. His name was Ben Connolly, but then I wrote out his full name was Benjamin Owen Connolly.
Holy moly, dude.
Yeah,
See
yeah.
that's where you realize that it's these types of moments for me that, through my journey as well, of like finding spirituality again and really reconnecting with God, as you go start going like, all of these things that we tell ourselves like, oh, that's a coincidence, like, oh, I don't know how to explain that, right? It's like they're all around us all the time, and you start going, it's like, I was on this journey, I've been on this journey, all the ups and downs, with a reason. There's purpose. It was always meant to find this path. And that's what's so cool about it, man. And you realize like, when you can at least really understand that, and I know everyone can, is because when you're in the dumps, you feels like, oh man, this isn't right for me. But it's like, this is a test, this is a lesson, getting you to a point where now all of a sudden these things are adding up everywhere, and you're like truthfully, what are the chances that you write a story that's about a bear? You know what I mean? You got an action film with the main character's name is Benjamin Owen Connolly. Like, that's just like, the probability of that is so little. And people like, everyone writes a story about a bear, but it's like, yeah, but then to find yourself in a community where it's known as the Bears, and you know what I mean, like where it's all around this, taking these comedy type, very animated type comedy, and making it, a story that is
There's
just
something
so.
about it that resonates with people, and especially just I didn't even know if like naming a hometown made sense at the time either. I knew it had to do with just something based with small towns and just kind of how people like you interact with on a day-to-day basis. So trying to create the kind of characters you would see, like, oh yeah, there's the people that have the big farm, there's the one guy who runs the coffee shop, and then it's usually kind of a weird crummy old diner. So there was always interesting characters that kind of flow into that kitchen and stuff like that. And so it's things that I would see as a kid too, because when I was hanging out with my dad, always had to go for his coffee breaks, and then would sit down. And there's all the other construction workers and concrete workers in town. It's just kind of like their thing they do, right? So I would sit down and just kind of just absorb all of this, and they'd look at you like, oh wow, you're going to be a good artist when you grow up.
Mm.
Didn't make sense to me at the time, but just with God showing you patience, that yeah, now that I'm 37, I these things are still becoming, like, they're still being discovered.
Dude, and that's what's so cool is like kind of going more into that mindset of like when you come, for those who see it this way, it's like when you come into this realm in this new vessel, right? This amnesia that kind of kicks in, right? Where it's like you're making sense of this whole world again, but your gut intuition as you start getting older starts to bring things back, right? And I
Hmm.
think it's cool is to what you're saying now is like how many times if we really sit back and think about when we were younger that like really put us on a path to where we are now or really
Hmm.
ingrain things towards the positive and the negatives of the now, right? And at the end of the day they're all one anyway because they get you to where you're going. But I just, for me, it was the same thing. Like you look back and you're like, oh yeah, people were saying that stuff about things that they thought I was gonna do this or I was gonna do that, or and I can't believe I'm like that's the road I'm taking. Like I remember when I was in like 7 or 8, like me and my buddies would write stories about movies that we wanted to recreate, and then just realizing, being like, oh, you guys are really good at doing that. You know what I mean? And we didn't know what we were doing, but it was like interesting to see like people, like those things that kind of get like put into your subconscious, and you have to kind of find it again, and you go, oh shit, yeah, man, that was happening. Wow, that's crazy that I'm actually now doing that. You know what I mean? Like you start really having to dig sometimes, but then it can also work on the other side where you get the traumas that which we're seeing now, right? It gets so ingrained in people that it becomes a situation where all they look back to and they remember are the worst times. And you know, so it's just so fascinating to me, man. And it just lets you know that God really is in control of this whole thing, and it gives me at least this breath of fresh air. And obviously, having the Bears in the community of people that are on that same wavelength really takes another level of like, all right, we can do this.
Definitely. I agree. Like, I guess one of the things I'm learning now with also just doing the animation and now having the bear community just getting excited for everything, I'm also trying to like take lessons from it too. So what is the developing these cartoons actually doing for me? When I watch Owen's streams, to show me the importance of community, being grateful for what God has blessed you in your life, things like that that I was taken for granted all the time. I'd
Totally.
like to explore these things and talk about them, but I didn't really explore them deep in my own heart yet. I was almost afraid to go that deep yet. And it took some, pretty intense events in my own life to finally be like, okay, you know what? There's nowhere to go in the mind anymore. I have to start exploring my heart. And that was one place I was pretty scared of going into. But
Mm-hmm.
luckily, I was able to, just through the power of prayer, able to kind of get through that. And I mean, this is what may seem kind of intense. I remember when I was praying, and it was at one of these lower points. This is right after Rick and Morty. I started praying. He warned me of deception. I just heard one word, deception, in my head. And then suddenly everything in a split second just shifted. And I felt like I understand what demons are trying to do. They play an influence game. They come at you from the left, the right, wherever direction. They cannot physically touch you. They just whisper in your ear, and they're very, very good at it. So as I was discovering this, I thought, I know your game now. You're very good at that, and I'll respect you for that, but you're not going to do that to me anymore because he loves me, you don't. And that was enough for me to just kind of get a bit of that spiritual strength again. And I think that was probably one of the biggest steps into just rebuilding my heart, because I was definitely ignoring it for some time.
Dude, yeah, that's so powerful, man. And being storytellers, you and I both, and creating these ideas and bringing them to life, you realize just like how all these stories that we see and are so connected to are really just that, right? It's well, it's the Bible essentially, but it's going into the belly of the beast, going into the deepest parts of our subconscious, going into the deepest parts of our hearts, facing the darkest things that are naturally there,
Mhm.
facing those demons, right? Being able to look them in the eye, looking yourself in the eyes, physically and or metaphorically, and learning to
Mhm.
go like, who am I? Who is it that I want to be? Am I willing to follow God? Am I willing to follow that light, and allow myself to forgive myself for the
Mhm.
things that I may have done in my life or the things that I did not do? Can I be honest with myself, right? Like all these things
Yeah.
that, you're talking about, myself included. And it's such a powerful thing, man, when you are a storyteller and you realize, like, when you have that mindset, at least for me, you bring it now into your stories with such a different, like, just energy that you're like, this stuff makes more sense now. And when you're doing it from at least
Totally.
a place of logos, or at least I'm trying to, that's what I'm striving to do. I don't know, like, I feel like my storytelling has just gotten so much better. Like right now, I'm working with one of the bears, Bari Bear, Rob, and we're working on a feature film right now. And like we just been going back and forth because we're on that same vibration. We want to tell that same sense of truth. And dude, it's like a comedy, but it's bringing in all the pieces that with gravy and some of these
Some life
laughs.
events that you've experienced that you kind of relate to. They're different, but there's
Mhm.
enough. There's a connecting element to them, and so just when you share your ideas, you're like, oh yeah, 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 and then suddenly that opens up a whole different realm of ideas that
Yep.
you weren't even wondering if you're gonna knowing if you're gonna use them or not. But now that you found a frequency that they kind of connect to, and now you're like, okay, all right, I
Totally.
think this was here for a reason. I just had to put it in the back burner for now, but it was important for a reason.
Totally, dude, 100%. And when you are in the creative process with other people, right, and you can get on that same vibration, you I'm assuming you've been there where you go like, oh man, like we're on it, like we're like Avatar right now, where we're connecting, through that ether, man. And it's cool when you start to do it. And at least in my intuition, in my heart, where I'm like, I'm really trying to tell a true story here. Like I'm trying to tell the positive of life, you know. But like you said, not allowing the deception of the demons, those whispers, to override the story. Like knowing that it's a part of the story, but it's not what makes the story. Obviously it's trying to get to the end point of knowing, like, oh, things are good, but it's like things are good because something bigger than us is what's allowing that to be good. You know what I mean? Like,
They'll throw in some doubt and everything, and then you're wondering, yeah, maybe it isn't that good of an idea, and I haven't really fully thought it out or anything, and that's just them whispering. They're really good at it, and I can almost respect it in a way, like it's something that's a power that I do not understand.
yeah,
What it did teach me was, okay, so there is a spiritual realm. There are things that kind of operate in the unseen, and it's I guess, like, yeah, once you start realizing how they have this ability to kind of affect you in the physical, I guess that's what makes it kind of hard for some people without the power of prayer and being grateful and things like that. It's just like, okay, God set you on a path for a reason, and He may have put you through so many different tribulations, but it's not over yet. It's going to keep going. You're going to keep learning and developing wisdom through it.
totally, dude. And I actually made a post about this in regards to being that a lot of people with this disconnect with God, not because God's disconnecting with people, but we've put up these, as I look at it, as like shields from allowing that light to really shine through to us.
Mhm.
You see that there's an addiction to the deception. I made a whole post about it, and knowing, like, just based off of our film and entertainment that's out there, like movies that are about magic, magicians, and these illusionists, and the prestige, and America's
Oh
got
yeah.
America's got talent, and you got the winners being magicians. And when you look at the idea of, like, magician and sorcerer are basically the same thing, but obviously one has a different connotation than the other to most people. You realize that, like, oh, we're teaching this deception at such a young age, and to be enthralled by it, right? And it is interesting when you see people kind of pulling a fast one on you, but when right, it is deceiving, it's supposed to be, and you're not drawn in to the deception, and being like, don't tell me the trick. I don't want to know, right? And you get a lot of people who just want to be entertained and allow that deception to be exactly like you said, those whispers of,
Hmm.
oh, like, this guy really just did do magic. And really, in many ways, there is that truth to it, like at a spiritual level, and an etheric level. But I think it's so fascinating when you see how many people are like addicted to those whispers, right? Because then you get, at least I see it, like friends who were working on a film for 10 years or 6 years, and they didn't get past the first act, and all they were like, it's just not there yet. I'm still letting, and again, patience, I get it.
Hmm.
But there's a difference between pursuing it, allowing it to kind of go through its rewrites, its fails, shelving it or whatever the case is, but people just didn't actually put any more time into it, but they
Mhm.
wouldn't stop talking about it. It's like, I'm working on this feature film. Oh, how's it going? Oh, it's the same one 5 years ago. You know, does that make sense? Like, it's just like they're like
Absolutely.
almost deceiving themselves of like, you're never gonna make it. You're never gonna finish it.
I think I was definitely doing that with myself with just the idea of hometown because I mean, what, like 7 years have gone by and I'm only thinking of gags still. I'm like, oh, that's a funny one. That's a funny one. But the biggest thing was there's no storyline connecting it all. And of course, you're seeing the way cartoons are being made. Like, well, Rick and Morty's got this really intricate storyline underlying with the family and his whole path and everything. I kind of tried doing that with my own characters, but I felt like I was forcing it because it was almost disingenuous to what I wanted to make. I just wanted to focus on what was kind of that raw emotion of just being funny.
So
Now I have to like tie in this whole traumatic nihilism into the character, and there's got to be a point to it. The character's trying to figure out the universe. That stuff kind of got messy in my head, and I thought, it's almost an act of desperation to try and force that into my cartoon just because that's what it seems like people are resonating with.
yeah.
But when things really shifted is that Dom Pettit cartoon. Then I think I posted up another little small animation
Mhm.
and just some of the comments that were initially coming from the Bears, just saying like your style and just like what it's doing to me, what it's making me what's reminding me of.
Mhm.
That's when I knew I was trying to come back onto the right path again. It's just a slow bit of light creeping back in, and then suddenly after just like making I think it was one of the animations I made was Wizardry 101. I didn't finish it. I
Mhm.
had some ideas for it, but I never quite got to see them in fruition, and that's okay. It's just there was so much shifting narratives and stuff last year that it was just kind of a product of its time. So it's best not overthink it anymore.
Right.
But then just some of the responses from the Bears were so encouraging that I realized, okay, this is what, there's people out here that want this stuff. They just want to simply laugh, share a bit of gravy. And, yeah, it's just kind of like that's just kind of a connected side of the community, right? And we can build each other up and it just kind of amplifies your artwork.
Dude, amen, man. And it's cool when you, like you said for yourself, you can humble yourself enough to know, like, hey, maybe now's not the right time, but like you said, when the light comes through, going like, okay, like something feels right here, and
Hmm.
allowing yourself to re-explore certain things or really get back to it. As I said earlier, people could be like, you sound contradictory, and like, you know, be patient, wait for it, but then you're saying that the person's not going to do it. Like, but in reality, it's knowing, like you said, like allowing yourself to just be present, be in the flow. Like you said, the comments,
Absolutely.
something felt right, and knowing like, okay, maybe there is something here. Maybe I can get back to this. And sometimes maybe it really isn't that, right? But you're not. I'm assuming going around talking about hometown every single day,
No.
and you know what I mean,
Due to
like,
my sister, who's definitely like on the same wavelength as me. And so what was kind of cool about us is we're both like thinking of our own animation projects, our own storylines where we can incorporate some humor and some of our life experiences together. And she had much more an intricate kind of a storyline based in the dream world and stuff. And when she would share to her ideas with me, I would always come in and inject some humor into it. And then
yeah,
she would do vice versa with mine. It's like, oh yeah, that'd be funny, but they should be doing this, just so it makes a little bit more sense. And between the two of us, our ideas were just bouncing back and forth like for the whole time. So I mean, I think that's what definitely strengthened that too. I
yeah.
mean, whether the projects are getting complete or not, we're still just sharing that same frequency and wavelength. And, we're still growing as storytellers and animators too. And it
Mm,
couldn't be that, we're 40 years old and then finally our first cartoon comes out and then
yeah.
it grabs an audience. And yeah, I mean, some of the stories we'd hear about like directors and stuff we liked, like with Ralph Bakshi and stuff, who made Fritz the Cat. And then he made some other ones, I think, was it Coonskin and American Pop? Made some really interesting films,
Yeah.
and he would do this mixture of mediums where he'd take like sometimes photos of like New York City streets and you just slap that in as a background and animate over top of it. So like already he's showing you don't need the highest quality Disney animators. You don't need to do like a dozen pencil tests. You just get in there and draw it, right?
Totally.
And that was really inspiring for us. We thought, okay, you don't have to obsess about Disney style quality. Just make a story. If it's good, tell it, and
Yeah,
if it doesn't resonate with everyone, who cares? Move on to the next one.
absolutely, man.
And yeah, it was just it was almost like a little bit of tough love too that we wanted. We actually enjoyed hearing that. We're like, yeah, totally.
Dude.
And it's funny, we were watching this interview with Ralph Bakshi, and he makes this reference to Fancy Pants. fancy pants directors. He says,
Yeah.
I have no respect for these guys. They work on Shrek 3 and 4 shit, and all they want to do is go to these parties and wear their fancy pants. And so
It's
what was
very
it?
Jason.
Yeah, then when Anita showed me was it Owen's stream, she's like, he also makes reference to the fancy pants. This is hilarious.
That is so funny. So wait, is your sister in the bear community as well?
She's Barry Jason, I'd say. She doesn't like take active part in the community, but you know, she's definitely just the same mindset and everything. So it's like I can go from a stream and just like talk about what's been going on, you
Yeah,
know, totally on the same level. And
that's
that's
good.
still awesome.
Yeah. It's always nice when you have that connection with family, not necessarily the bear community, but like you can just know like you can have these types of conversations. It's not going to lead to World War IV or World War III or whatever, and you can be like, yeah, it's like, all right, you get it, and you
My mom,
realize,
not quite so much, but that's okay. You know, we can still have a good conversation about just about anything else. But you know, it's not even. She's like, I don't want to hear it either. It's not even like confrontational or anything. She's just
hey,
like, oh, that's nice.
hey,
I'm.
dude, it's so is it? I don't know if you get like this, but I think it's so funny when you're so like wanting that truth, right? The gravy and realizing like things that have been deceiving. You're like, that was a deception. Oh man,
Oh yeah.
that was a good one. You know what I mean? But you're like, how do they do it? You know what I mean? Where some people just don't want to hear it, and then like I don't know if you get this, but like when I was early on and really waking up to things, I'm like, how do you guys not want to know this shit? Like, does anyone else think this is fascinating? They're like, just stop talking about it. I'm like, you guys don't want to know that the moon landing was fake? Like, am I the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
one here who gives a shit? Like, this is awesome. And they're like, why is this cool? Everyone's lying. I'm like, yes.
I think what was great is because it just once we started like piecing together, okay, the moon landing's fake. Then I think for me too, it was just like all these other random thoughts that come to my mind of thinking like, well, if everything's a major deception that I have to watch out for, what if the universe is the deception? That was
Oh,
a big one I had walking around my kitchen, like universe, universe. I'm like all one. I'm thinking, oh man, if they
yeah.
can wrap that around your eyes, then what could they, you know, possibly try and you know recreate a spell. And so I tried looking through some scriptures. I mean, this is even before I kind of got into like some of the flat Earth videos. Still, you know, things are trying to discover things out still, right? You know what the actual shape of the planet is, or things like that. You know, we don't know. It's definitely a realm of some kind, but there's so much more that we have to discover. And I think that was one of those thoughts is probably a big stepping stone for just kind of like, okay, if space is not what we say it is, then I'm right now my imagination's going to almost infinity again. I'm thinking like a child again, just
Totally.
you know, trying to pull in story references that I know, you know, like I remember you sharing your story a bit of a Hyperborea, like the
Yep.
little land around Arctic, and I'm just thinking, hey, what if those is shaped like Middle Earth? I'm just gonna kind of look at the maps for a quick second here.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some similarities there with the way that's shaped and the
Yep.
way the rivers are moving, and I was starting to think like who knows, right? Maybe there is an actual Middle Earth out there, and you know, some of the stories from an actual place made it into literature. Just we don't really know the full
Yep.
source of it, I guess. Yeah.
Totally, dude. What's funny kind of going on that, like when you start waking up to things and you start thinking, right? For me, I was talking about the subconscious thing. I was like, why have I felt like I've been in some of these conversations about, you know, the conspiracy theories or whatever that, and I was like, man, I felt like I've talked about this. And I actually remember this was like 2010, so it wasn't crazy long ago, but I remember when I was in New York, I had a guy that I was working this one catering job with, and we were outside, like kind of bringing people in. And at one point, it like slowed down. So it's just me and this dude. And he just started going on about like there's Middle Earth and like Hyperborea. Like he was going on it. And I was like, and I was 18 at the time, or yeah, 19, 18, 19. And I was like, holy shit. Like, but I remember just being so involved, like intrigued with like how genuine this guy was. But I remember being like, sounds wild. Cause, you know, at the time I didn't, you know half the shit I do now. But I just remember dawning on me, like going back, being like, oh man, like that guy came into my life for a reason. Like, because that energy of like just hearing these stories and being like, where is this guy getting this from?
He's planting those seeds in there for sure.
But
And yeah, you know, yeah, it's just like it took maybe 10 years, you know, and plus some life experience, and now it starts making sense.
totally, but even more so, kind of what you were saying, like it makes you kind of look back on not just that conversation, but like you looking at the books and the fairy tales and looking at old like mythology, and you start looking and going like, well, who made this mythology? Who said this was mythology? Like, who made this? Just a story, right? And you start to realize like there's still something being told here. And going back to creating, being creators, like what at least I know I do is like I'm putting things into the story that are trying to get people to see something without spelling it out. And I
Hmm.
realized through at least my awakening, being like, oh my gosh, people are doing that to me. And so like looking at knowing kind of like the rings of Hollywood and the deep and darkness of things that are happening at the high levels, you start realizing like, well, these people know something. They're putting it in their stories. They're not just,
Totally.
and now looking at it more like a true logistic, it's like these reboots aren't just being rebooted for shits and giggles. Like, and like, oh, it's a moneymaker. Well, there's been a bunch that have fallen completely flat, yet they
They
still
tap
want to
into
get
a deep side.
totally. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, go on.
I
Sorry.
was thinking, oh, sorry, I mean to cut you off there.
No, go.
Yeah, just kind of like thinking about with J.R. Tolkien and Middle Earth. I was starting to think like I don't know what his history was in the army or if he was in the navy.
Mhm.
I gotta really look into this again, but if maybe just he knew even people that were like exploring these parts of the world and they would bring back tales and then he's just being a naturally gifted writer, be like, okay, so like you said, like where does all this mythology even come from? What did it actually begin as myth or was it actual reality? And I thought of things like that too, like on a cathedral, like a gargoyle, for instance, like
Yeah.
what made a person picture a gargoyle, something with fangs and wings and things like that? Is that, I don't know, a person like tapping into a certain side of themselves that makes them like try and like personify a bat to a human, or was it an actual thing that existed at one point because there was I don't know, just like different like conquering of lands and probably sent out some ships. They may have ended up in a very foreign area of the world, and now they're bringing back tales of things in the sea and things like that.
Yeah. Dude, and I see that's what's so fascinating about the story of just like in this realm or life in general is knowing like there's so much wonder and there's so much mystery. And you know, it's in stories, it's in all these things that we can look into, but it's also knowing like when you go into talking earlier about the dream world, and I know you've written stories about it and your sister does as well, but like knowing like your dreams and things, can you can pull so much from it, and things that feel so real, and you realize to some level or another, and I can't say for certain what it is, but you realize that there's a sense of this feels real and this feels genuine, and just as much like there's something in your life here in this realm, like
Mm-hmm.
you have these pure emotions in your dreams, and you realize that there's something connecting you. And sometimes a lot of times, at least for me, like the answers to things are in my dreams, and you start looking at like, wow, man, if that feels so real and I feel like I can connect to that, and I'm waking up and it's nowhere to be found here, well, what about like the stories of life that were told and the things in the past, and the fairy tales, like, well, we're saying that's not real here, but yet there's could definitely be a sense of reality to it, right? And it's
Totally.
only focused on this one plane, right? And and a lot of us know, like the eye can only see so much, at least what we know now. We can only hear so much. We can only we can only experience so much through our senses. But is there the possibility that there's a whole world happening around us that we can't visually see, sense?
So there'd be like some interesting things in the dreams where you see like physical limitations are just completely gone. Like especially if you're having one of these really deep dream experiences, like one that kind of happens with me all the time is when walking down a highway or in a vehicle going down the highway, the
Mm.
road makes a sharp left or sharp right, the vehicle just keeps going straight. And
Yep.
because I live around all these lakes near, and there's big lakes, we just keep start hovering over the lake. Now the vehicle is slowly going into the water, but now I'm discovering all these objects under the water. I'm thinking, why would I start picturing like ships and strange
Wow.
buildings under the water now? And there's beings that are populating there. And so I just kind of wonder, like, does that come from movies? Does that come from the books and things I've read? Or is it just something else that I've known all along and just haven't seen it? I'm connecting to it somehow.
Dude, totally, man. And that's what and I can't confirm this, but I think in many ways, and this just kind of came to me. Do you think could it be that in this realm we live in, like the stories we're told we're tapping into things in our dreams all the time, but these stories that we're getting shown are basically kind of muddying that connection to those things and being like, oh, you just saw it in a movie, or oh, you just saw it or heard it in the show, or whatever the case is. So then it takes us from the ability to go like, but no, like I felt like that was in a dream, right? Like, and when you really think about it, right, if a lot of these things are being expressed to us in these movies and these stories that are tapping into some deeper truths of this realm that we're in, like, I don't know, man, could it be that's like kind of one of those things, like we're already innately getting these downloads or these connections through the dream world, and or at least just kind of like, when we're awake and we're daydreaming, and people go, oh, no, 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 that was, you got that from that movie, or you got it from that TV show. That's probably where it's from. It's like,
I kind of wondered now about the Mandela effects, because that one didn't work for me. Just because when people were starting to see like the switch in titles, I started thinking like, no, I feel like that's just straight up wizardry happening, and you're trying to make me feel confused where I'm pulling the source from. Maybe there were some changes, but like I don't know. But yeah, when you mentioned like, no, it belonged in a movie, like no, 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 no. There's something a lot more emotional with it actually.
well,
Movie can kind of have this I don't know, almost like a temporary feeling. You're like, okay, that was nice. It was a dramatic movie, maybe tap into some parts of your life. But
yeah,
then you watch something that's more sci-fi, and now your mind's just like, why does that stuff actually just connect with me? I don't know why. Like for some people, space travel and Star Wars, that makes people, I guess they're thinking about the what if, if there is space out there, how far can you go? And I think that's just a person trying to make sense of the dream realm. Once you're in there, I'm sure there's no firmament inside there. You're just kind
yeah,
of floating around this idea space, and you're trying to pick up on something and bring it back.
totally, dude. And it's so kind of one of my own experiences. Like, I had this dream. I was on this like almost like a whitewater rafting type thing, and there was this big, like, when you go to the amusement parks, like the water slides, there's that big like funnel that you kind of go into and it becomes dark.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So like I was going through this, like, yeah, I was just like in like on this raft, and I was going through, and I like went into this thing, and I went in, and I remember going like straight down into this like darkness, and I remember like feeling the wind blowing, and I was like in this beautiful serene area, then this dark hole, and when I came out of it, I was like in space, like, or with the perception of space, but I couldn't see anything, but I just felt like this vibration, like in like going through my
Yeah.
body, and it was like one of those things where I'm like, what the fuck was that? And I just remember being like, a friend who's kind of into like astral projections things. He's like, yeah, you had like probably like some sort of like out of body experience, and like feeling some sort of resonation, like resonating at something. And I'm like, I don't know, man, but it felt so real. And like for me, this hyperborea and all these things, I'm like, is that me like physically in a place that's similar to that, and like opening you into like a whole other dimension? Like, I'm like, I don't know.
So what's interesting is like, I guess I can add to that is right around the time when I was trying to reconcile my path of Christianity and coming back to God and feeling my inner light again. What happened is my brother, he OD'd right in front of me. This was a few years ago. He did too much cocaine, and he was just kind of talking me at the top of the stairs, and he just kind of slumped down and slid down the stairs, and I went chasing after him.
Uh,
And so when he kind of came back to it, he was in and out of this realm. Like, it was so weird. I just, for a moment, I mean, for a good week, I thought he lost his mind, because he would just be talking to me. We're having normal conversation. And he's like, John, where am I? What is this place? He's like touching the walls, and he's like, it's like gasping. He was
yeah,
just like,
yeah,
I'm not here anymore. I don't know what this place is. He was touching the walls, and he was just in tears. He's like, I
yeah.
don't know what this place is. And then he's back to normal again, back having a
Wow.
conversation. So it was like this off and on for a week.
Totally.
And then I was just getting really kind of bummed by this, 'cause I thought, what's going on with him? I just do not understand at all. And I finally just broke down and asked God, can you help me make sense of this? I don't understand at all. And that's when we went, deception. And that's when I realized the spirits and the whispers and things like that. And I thought, okay, because he was seeing something, he was interacting with a whole different realm. And
Dude.
that's when I started waking up to the idea. I'm like, okay, this is not, we're not being taught like what we initially originally believed anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It's just it was an interesting start to the journey for sure. I mean, sorry to make it like all kind of go into those areas, but it was just kind of, yeah, I remember that's kind of the wake up call I had. I was like, okay, he's interacting with this whole realm that doesn't seem to be present anymore.
Yeah. dude, and it's wild, man, is when you realize that there are these different levels of consciousness. And I can't really chime in with like I know everything, but just through these experiences, not that I've had that, but I guess here's an interesting one. To tell my own story, when I was younger, I thought it was wise to do some Molly and go to Six Flags. And it was stupid. It was the worst idea I ever did. But in the moment, I was so involved, obviously feeling what I felt. And I just remember the moments where I was having these ups and downs in life, just like everything around me felt so like it felt like everything became dark in like a way that I'd never experienced obviously before, because I never really did it. I never tried it, that kind of stuff. But then
Hmm.
like life had this beauty to it, and obviously people are like, oh, that's just the drug. But it was such a way where I was like, my literally in these moments, like split seconds, the way I perceive the world is so contorted and so just like destruction. And then 1 minute I'm seeing the beauty in the flower, I'm seeing the beauty in the sky and the clouds. And you realize, and for me, I was like, I'm in these moments seeing the world so differently. And that like totally threw me off. And I was
Hmm.
like, and it was it would at one point it realized to me, or it dawned on me, I'm like, I've had these types of sensations and emotions in my dreams, not necessarily to the extreme that I did, but like
Yeah.
how I'm in a dream and I'm following this path, and then all of a sudden it starts to change. And what was even more fascinating, and the reason why I stopped doing that, because I just that wasn't for me, but it was the coming to the reality of the situation of going. But in my dreams, I've learned how to lucid dream, and I can change the outcome. So when things felt like they were dark, instead of two things, instead of it being like, oh, let me get out of the dream and wake up, it was going, let me be here for a second. Let me see what's going on. Why am I in this dream? Why is this happening to me? Or why am
Hmm.
I allowing this to kind of manifest? And when I learn how to do that and just be present with it and observe, and then be like, okay, I want to navigate the outcome of this, or try to see the path towards where I want this to go, and I could do it, I was like, holy shit. I was like, that's life. Like, that's life. Like, and so I'm grateful for the moment that I had, but it was one of those things that like, in this, what we're seeing today, like people having these perceptions of like, you're stuck in the deception, or you're addicted to the deception that this is all you can see. You don't see that there's choice of finding your way out of it. So you're seeing
Totally.
reality. You're in a reality that is so different than, kind of like with your brother, like so different than everyone else. And even though we might be seeing the same realm, to maybe these people that,
Yeah.
you know,
That's what, yeah, things like that. Just that, I don't know. They definitely kind of give you this hint that, your dreams are a lot more useful to you than you might originally think. And yeah, like I used to have this one recurring dream where it's always in like this giant house. It's just lots of hallways, lots of doors, and each door opened up to an old memory. And I think just like how you're saying, once you kind of learn how to kind of navigate through that a little better, you start to recognize the patterns a lot better. Like, oh wait, I know this hallway. I've had dreams. I've walked down this thing. I know if I open this door, I'm going to see that. I'm going to see that again. And eventually, I think once I started to just get a lot more experience with that, the house thing went away. I stopped dreaming about it. It was just
mm,
dreaming about all different kinds of things, though. I don't think I have quite the amount of controls I did back then, but
yeah,
I never, it was useful at the time for just helping me think, okay, there's a pattern to this house, and everything, and all these hallways and doorways and stuff like that. And I almost thought it was almost like a mind prison of some kind I created for myself, and kind
yeah,
of brings me back to like maybe some people addicted to their deceptions. And I think maybe that was probably part of it. It's just a big house full of deceptions. Each room I open up is another one, right? But then you realize you don't need it anymore. You have a much more stronger lit path, and you don't have to go in that house anymore. So you can just kind of, everything's new, everything's kind of exciting again.
mm,
And I think maybe there was a sort of lesson there I was taught because, yeah, I mean, I haven't had that dream in so many years now, but I remember it so clear. I'd almost get it like almost every night. Just
dude.
like, oh, this weird house again.
Yeah, you're like, oh, and we're back, dude. Okay,
Yep,
so
yep.
real quick on that, because this is a crazy sync. So remember the animated movie I was telling you that I wrote?
Hmm.
Long story short, movie's called Mars. It's an acronym for Marty's Alternative Reality Sanctum. It's about a boy who basically you kind of see his imagination dwindle into his teenage years because of, you know, single parent household. He gets made fun of for having an imaginary friend, and it's all these things that basically you see him in his dream world having these adventures, having the friends in the dream world, very real. And then he comes to reality, and he basically tells his creativity, his dream world, like, you're not real, like you don't exist. So like this portal that basically brings him to his dream world shuts off.
Interesting.
So in his teenage years, you see kind of the transition in like his and how he interacts with his mom. You see the interaction in his room, and just kind of seeing he becomes this kind of shunned off kind of to himself teenager. Point being is he gets into an accident. He gets stuck in his dream world now. The portal's still closed, but he's now stuck in his dream world. He's in a coma, but it's not like you're not seeing like blood and stuff like that. But anyway,
No. Yeah.
the point of that whole thing is when he was in the dream, there's a point in the movie where he's trying to get to this mountain in the middle of like basically this his on Mars. He's trying to get to the mountain because in the mountain is the subconscious, and the key to get out of the portal is the subconscious. On his way, he gets stuck in his house. There's this bad storm that gets put in there, and he can't find himself removing this lucid dreaming of like this, get rid of the storm. So he goes into his house. He finds his house, and in that house, kind of similar to yours, but different, is it's all these mirrors. And each time he's
Okay.
opening these doors, like he just keeps seeing the reflection of himself, and he can't face it. So what he ends up doing, because he's trying to find his friends to get out, because the storm's starting to pull the roof off, and it's basically like taking them off in a way, and he's trying to protect them all, but he can't. He's trying to save them, but not look at his reflection, because he's seeing like this just the pain that's there. So he starts smashing, like he's trying to smash the windows and save his friends. And it's just interesting of, like you said, like opening doors and like learning how to feel comfortable with this is trying to tell you something. um just like
Yeah.
an old home type. There was a sync there that just, I was like, man, that's so interesting that you kind of had that. And I wrote this project, not that it's completely off, like new, like I know a lot of people have similar types of dreams, but just the fact that you had that, I felt I had a comment.
Totally. I feel like it reminds me. I think one of the first things I mentioned to you, just like I sent you a random message over Instagram. It was just a thought I had, and I think it kind of
Mm-hmm.
relates to some of this talk about our dreams. I was thinking of like, what is an actual thought? I thought like every single thought has to be a simulated alternate reality. We
Yep.
create it in a split second, and I thought like, how do we come up with that? It's like, say you're reaching for a glass. I feel like we've simulated 1,000 times, and now we've just done enough times where we know the right way to pick it up.
Yeah.
But in a split second, we've explored, I don't know, so many different possibilities, almost like how an AI would, try and simulate things in the physical realm. I think we just do that on a constant basis, like with just about every single thing that we do, or every little motor movement we do has some sort of alternate reality based around it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree with that. And I was thinking about that, not just because you brought it up, but just thinking about your text since we had that conversation. And what you start to realize even too is like when you have gone through that simulation so many times and figuring out the right way, you also realize when there's lack of limitation or the thought of limitation on your mind, you could pick it up so many ways and it feels so natural. But like thinking about when people kind of give you a skill or something to be like, all right, I want you to pick this up without using your thumb. And you see kind of people stop, right? And they go, and you see kind of like the simulation gets kind of pulled off, right? And what for me, kind of what you said and chiming a little more, is you realize that these simulations of these thoughts and ideas that come through us all the time, when you put limitation and you don't know how to, or at least allow yourself to really like embrace the limitation, you realize that it actually opens up your mind to so much more creativity and so much more opportunity and so many more outcomes just by doing that, right? And it kind of allows you to be, talking about simulation, kind of almost better within the simulation. And I think this, bringing this to creativity and storytelling, I feel like when, like, and even with Owen, like you get banned off 109 different social media sites, it only makes all that limitation expand your creativity. It expands your
Yeah,
ability
yeah,
to,
absolutely.
to be, to do so much more. And that's what I think deep ingrained is that godly, message and light that's being shined through you and being like, okay, here's your creativity, here's your skills that you've honed. Now I'm allow you to shine through them in such a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And it's almost like, okay, you now have seen that there's a limitation to all these different pathways you took. Now YouTube's taking down D Live, and now even some of these lesser stream sites are now coming after you. It's just like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Like, is there any place that's just gonna, kind of work out for the Bears? And of course, there's unauthorized TV, but it also seems in the midst of that too, we're finding other little ways of like just kind of a way we reword some of our sayings, or
Mhm.
like with burying Larry and tea
There
time
you
and stuff like that. All these fun ideas, like, and it's just constant source of humor. But at the same time, it's also really tapping into that creativity as well,
yeah,
because you're just like, there's got to be a way to kind of trick them, but then also just kind of stay on this lit path that we have. We know that we're kind of being guided towards like there's an inner light that's guiding us, and
mhm,
also it's guiding us toward like the true light. And I think it takes us down paths that we didn't think that we were
totally.
supposed to go down originally. You're thinking, okay, I thought all these doors were shut, but there's this tiny little glimmer of light, and you can see it. But there's all this kind of dark stuff kind of surrounded with YouTube and Facebook and social media, and be like, no, 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 the answer is Bertaria. And then I thought, okay, then that's just like, yeah, that was like definitely the cool sync he had there, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Dude, absolutely, man. And yeah, dude, I'm actually gonna have to get going. Unfortunately, I don't want to cut it too short, but dude, I just yeah, that's a good place to end. And for those who obviously know Barataria, but those who don't know, it's just about building community. It's about people like you and I, like we met through it, and just genuine people wanting to do well by self first, but then others around them. And I think that's more than anything what is needed, and I feel that is what is
totally.
being uh, expressed by God. And I think that's what's cool is people that like yourself, myself, and others who are just trying to listen, really hear that and follow it and pursue it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was a really cool talk. I just my mind was all over the place with this one, with just thinking about dreamscapes and things like that, and how we kind of throw it into our creativity. It's pretty fun for sure, because I love to kind of explore these things without even making perfect sense of it either.
Yeah,
So I mean, if I confused anybody who's watching this, yeah, it's just kind of where my mind goes.
dude, we can do this again. And for to make you feel better, I go on tangents all the time. So people are like, I don't know where you're going, dude. Get to the point. So you did great, man. And I really
Thanks, man.
appreciate your time. And if you don't mind sharing where people can follow you, we can take.
Yeah, I'm kind of lacking on that. I don't have a website or anything put together. It's just mostly me on Instagram, and yeah, right now I'll have to kind of work on that. And once this cartoon's done, I'll have to create a full website kind of centered around some of these announcements and stuff. But
Awesome,
yeah,
man.
for sure.
So you're just on social media. Can I share that with on the show notes?
Yeah, just find me on hometown underscore bear, and yeah, I think it's not private or anything, so you can just go ahead and check out what I have, and I'll try and keep more animation work coming along. Even if it's not like the full stuff, it's just I can show bits and pieces like backgrounds and just some of my work in progress stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, for those who don't know, I highly recommend checking it out. It just goes to show you, like you said earlier, man, that you don't need to be a part of a big production studio to create great quality entertainment that's true to who you are. So it was an
Appreciate it,
honor,
man.
man. Dude, I appreciate your time and thank you for sharing your story, man.
All right, thank you very much. All right, have a good night, man.
All right. See y'all. Have a good night. See you next
See ya.
time.